Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast with me, your host, Pete Titus. I hope you're well, I hope you're catching a few fish and you're getting out there and enjoying it. Don't know if you're the same, that if a friend contacts you the day before and says, well, I'm heading to Wales for the day, do you want to come along? And you think about it for a few microseconds and, of course, join them. He's recently been on the podcast, Luke Kozak. It was him who contacted me and said, would you like to come along? So I've, of course, said yes. Driven up this morning and he's just setting up. We're going to have a bacon sandwich to start the day. We're fishing the Usk. He's been up a little bit recently and I'm going to find out a little bit more about that and how he's been getting on. I've, of course, been watching Andy and IB's video of their trip down as well, which was slightly different conditions. I drove up the M5 through some rain this morning, but that seems to have abated here. We've got some sunshine. I'm told there's some March browns around as well. So we're going to give it a go. But the way that we're going to start this morning is with a breakfast. So Luke's just getting his stove out and we're going to have a bacon sandwich and see how we get on. Wasn't that long ago that we were chatting, mate, but thank you for the invite. Good to see you, bud.
Hello, Pete. Here we are on the Usk. It's springtime. Conditions are reasonable. It's a little bit bright at the moment, but there is a bit of cloud hanging around, so hopefully that might do us a bit of a favour later on. But I thought of you yesterday. I gave you a call. It's a bit spare at the moment, but here we are.
And that is what I love. We were just chatting off mic and I was saying how excited I was, and I said, do you think I should bring a nymphing rod down? And then we sort of made a conscious decision to say, sod it, let's go and see if we can sit them out and find a rising fish. So we've sat and ate 2 bacon rolls each. We've had a great cup of coffee as well. I think we're in good shape, aren't we, mate?
We're in very good shape. My tummy's happy. My caffeine is fixed. And I'm starting to tremble slightly with excitement. I can't wait to get down there. I think we're bang on in terms of timing. It's about 10 o'clock now. And we're going to wander down and see what's what. But yeah, it's a lovely beat, this. And it's got a variety of water, sort of slower stuff at the bottom, but a few nice runs. And then midway up, a few riffles and long tail outs where fish usually hold, and yeah, we've got it all to ourselves. So I can't wait.
And you've been coming up a little bit the last few weeks, and I know the sense I've got is that the start of the season, people have been catching fish, which has been wonderful, but it's not been up there as a 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 start to the season, has it?
It's not been on fire. I don't have my sort of finger on the pulse in terms of social media, but I do have my sources. And I was up over the weekend, and admittedly, I picked a beat that was too far upriver. It was really low and really clear, and I really struggled. I had 1 or 2 opportunities that I missed. I think probably lower down on the Usk was fishing a bit better. So a few people looking at the reports did well. 1 or 2 people had sort of big numbers, but mostly were just 1s, 2s and 3s of fish. And a few nice ones among them. But it's been, I think the water's still cold. Conditions have been easterlies and northerlies, which again can be a little bit tricky. But it's not been like I don't think it's been a sort of a really, a hugely big start to the season, but we'll see. I think as things warm up, naturally, things should improve.
And patience is a virtue, isn't it? Because, we sit through these long winter days, wet, miserable, cold, windy days, thinking about the moment of when the river actually opens. And of course, nature's blissfully unaware that it's start of the trout season and everything, the switch needs to be turned on. Sometimes it's just how it goes, isn't it? And sometimes we just have to be a little patient, don't we?
Yeah, you've got to bide your time. You've got to. There's no point in turning up too early. I don't think. I think what you're looking at is LDO hatches and March Brown hatches, possibly a bit of nymphing action if you're that way inclined. You could fish streamers if you so wish. But yeah, you're concentrated in between the hours of sort of, I guess now 10 o'clock through to about 3 in the afternoon. Obviously there are variables outside of those times, but that's the main times. I don't think it's any different to any other river at this time of year. But yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes, Pete. I don't know. It's going to be fun. I tell you what, I'm just really excited about. Just really pleased to be fishing with you because it's been too long.
Absolutely, mate. I think it's probably a couple of years, isn't it, since we got together, and I think you were down fishing the Tour, and we had a nice time then. And like you say, there's no rush. Despite the fact knowing that I would turn up early, it's one of those things. I think if anyone knows me that if I say 9:30, they probably know that it's going to be anywhere from 9:05 to. But you were well prepared for that, weren't you?
He was early, folks. Yes, he was, as always. And I tried to get the drop on him and turn up and sort of get bacon and coffee ready, but that was impossible because he was already here. But that's fine, that's cool. I know Pete well enough, so we rocked up, and I got the frying pan out and the bacon, and we've had delicious breakfast and some decent Java coffee. So we're ready to rock. So yeah, we're going to set up and take the dry fly rods down, and we're going to it's dry or die today by the sounds of it.
Sounds like it. Yeah, absolutely. Let's give it a go. As I said, I'm here purely for fun. We were just again talking off mic and just said how excited I was, and I sort of flirted with the idea of taking a nymphing rod down just in case while we're waiting. But the nice thing about this is that we'll just catch up, sit by, see if we can find a fish, and see if perhaps somebody has a fly at it, and see if we can catch one or two, or just to see a few rising would be really cool. It's many years since I fished the early hatches, and I was talking to Luke about it, and when I had the online magazine Eat Sleep Fish, I wrote a piece with our mutual friend Lee Evans, invited me along. We were fishing the Usk, and we just hit an epic hatch of large darks, and I had to run up to him and said, I've got no photographs to go with the piece I've got in my mind. So I was just transfixed with fish rising just about everywhere I looked. So it would be kind of cool if it were like that, but just to see them doing that. But if we get a couple of fish, come and have a look at dry, I'd be more than happy. Just been a few moments, really. We walked along the bottom of the beat, just poking our heads into some spots. It was a little bit deeper. We spotted a flatter, shallower piece of water and seen a few fish rising. There's a mixture of March Brown and large dark coming off. I've got into the tail of a pool. There's a fish rising quite happily that I thought I'd covered. It was in incredibly skinny water that refused the fly, came and had a look at it, refused it, and wandered off again. But it looks like there's a lovely hatch happening at the moment. And I could see, the water's so shallow, I can see the fish. Not a huge fish, but I saw him scoot off after he'd had a look at my fly and went on. Luke's gone upstream a little bit. We've just been chatting away, catching up. He was telling me about the fish he's caught here and when he was fishing. If you listen to the previous podcast, he talked about his friend Mark, who we sadly lost, and how they used to come and fish here and the times that they'd had, which has been really nice to hear that. Kind of, like I say, had a few rising fish. I'm just waiting now to see. I've seen one move further up. I was just wondering whether this guy might come back, but I wonder, because the water was so skinny, that was just enough. I got a long leader. It's probably 16, 17 feet long. I think I did everything okay. I think I covered it pretty well, but yeah, there was something he didn't like about it. I saw him sort of follow it, look, and then swim away. So that was enough. So this is going to be a wonderful education for me. I used to fish here 30 years ago, early on, but it looks to me as though we might get lucky. We might get lucky. It looks like I've got to be on my game though. So I've got to think about these things very carefully, think about the cast, play everything out, and keep working my way up. Nothing's risen for a little bit. It's a big, long pool. The river's probably 60, 70 feet across. I'm not even shin deep. Well, I'm just about shin deep in this tail here. That gives you an indication of how shallow the water the fish was actually working in. And you sort of play these things back in your mind, don't you? Could I have done this? Should I have done this? I think everything was okay. But of course, I'll keep thinking about that for a little bit until perhaps I see another fish rise. As quickly as it started, it finished. I had 2 more rising fish. I stuffed one of them. I had an emerger on. I'd switched to an emerger. And it just exploded over the fly. I don't know who was more shocked or surprised. I don't know if I screamed. I could have done, but I'm not 100% sure. And then stuck with the emerger and had a fish of about 10 inches or so that I'm really pleased about. But it's just gone incredibly quiet now. So I'm just sort of waiting to see what will happen if we get another flush of March Browns again or not, and whether to move up. I'm sort of slightly deeper. I'm almost knee deep now, and I wonder if we might get some nice comfortable rises from fish if it comes feeling the security of that slightly deeper water. Like I say, I'm still playing through that fish in my mind. I've made my leader a tiny bit longer, tiny bit thinner, and thinking all those things through. And this is just wonderful. As I said, I've probably walked 15 feet, that's it, in however long this is. It's probably 40, 45 minutes now. So I'm just going to sit and wait for a bit, see if anything else happens. And if not, I might just go up and see how Luke's doing and go from there. But yeah, it's really absorbing fishing. I walked upstream a little bit further and I'm just sort of following my hunches where I think fish might be. I'm looking for any slack spots right against banks that might just break up the flow a little bit where a nice fish could perhaps sit. And with the hatch easing right off, there's absolutely nothing on the water at the moment. I'm moving a little bit more quickly, so I'm also looking, and because I don't know the beat at all, I'm sort of looking for any well-worn paths. They must be good spots, so I'm looking at those and following those, looking to see if there's a fish around, looking of course for any bugs at the moment, and seeing if there's any signs, any clues that'll be there. I don't know how this is going to play out if we had our go early on in the morning. I'm wary of the sun swinging round a little bit as well, because my hunch is that it's probably going to come down into the fish's faces as the day progresses. I could be wrong, might be a tiny little bit off, but that's how it feels to me. It's always lovely when you spot your friend casting away and think, right, I think he's found somewhere interesting. Buddy, have you had a good morning?
I've had a great morning. I haven't been tremendously successful. I've lost 2 long distance releases, as we call them in the business, and I've sort of missed about 4 or 5 in a run. I put it down to my bad workmanship. I think it's early and I am rusty, and these fish are quick, so you've got to be on your mettle. It's been it's a beautiful morning. It's been quite bright, so some of the fish in the tail outs have been difficult to get close to. There's been a lot of crouching going on, and not very much success in that regard. But it does seem, Pete, that there's a bit of cloud starting to build now. So what is it, about midday now?
It's probably later than that, actually. It's getting on for 1 o'clock now.
Getting on for 1. So this afternoon, I've got high hopes for the next couple of hours. So we'll keep an eye on things. But yeah, it's been nice, but it has exposed the winter layoff somewhat.
I find that incredibly hard to believe. And sometimes the fish need to get their eyes in a little bit as well. So there's an element of that, being the good friend that I am. But there is an element of that as well. And it has been, my feel has, the fish have been on, or if they've been off, and there's been no in between. And I've sort of a good distance behind. I've stepped into a couple of pools, waited and watched, seen absolutely nothing happening, and then just sort of wandered up and happened to find you. But it's there, and when it started, you know, the hatch was quite good, wasn't it? There was plenty going on, yet the fish still, to me, weren't consistent. You had to sit and wait, and it wasn't even when it was starting to switch off. I was kind of thinking at home in Devon that if that was happening, the fish would still be having half an eye upwards, but it doesn't feel to me, and you know, I'm not any expert by any means on this, so it's hard for me to comment, but it didn't feel as though you had a chance to bring them up. Would that be how you were kind of feeling?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's well, first and foremost, it's quite bright, and I think that automatically makes them quite wary. But also, I think, as you say, there's been very subtle pulses of mostly March browns. They've definitely been taking emergers. I've seen them waking across some of the tails of pools quite close up. So they are picking off the odd emergers that are coming out. But as you say, there has been sort of the hatches haven't been sustained. One or two LDOs around. But yeah, we'll see. It's not over yet, so we'll see how it goes.
And that's early season fishing, isn't it?
It is. Early seasons, it's not easy. And yeah, the things can be against you. There's not a lot of vegetation, so creeping and blending into the background could be a bit more difficult, especially on more exposed bits of river. Yeah, I'm not going to make any more excuses. I'm just going to try and get on with it and get a fish in the net. But we'll see how we go, Pete.
And how's this comparable to your previous visits this season?
It's a lot more consistent today. There's a lot more happening. It was very cold when I was up at the weekend before. Friday wasn't so bad, but Saturday, it was cold, and so much so that the following day, the Sunday, I decided to pack up and go home because Sunday was looking really cold with a northerly. So, and I couldn't really find a beat that I wanted to fish. They were all booked up in advance, as they are a lot of the time on the us this year, unless you've got access to the lesser fished stuff. So I decided to keep my powder dry. But I'm glad we've come up today because I still think we've got a solid chance.
I've left Luke in a pool he's got a hunch about. He's had some success there in the past. So I ate my sandwich while he was stealth-like and waited for something to happen. I've gone back to where I started. Similarly, I just have a feeling that something might happen here. The clouds come over a little bit. It's actually just lifted a little bit while I'm talking. I'm not the only one waiting for the March brown hatch to get going or potentially get going, and I'm standing right at the very tail, ankle deep in the pool, and I'm watching the birds come out, and the odd March brown that's hatching doesn't get much of a chance. They're sort of waiting on the branches on the edges of the river, and every time something comes along, they're out. There's one just taking one now, and they just drop, take it, and head back to their branch again. And that's really cool. I feel like I'm not the only one. We'd like a few more, the bird and me, see if that gets the fish going a little bit more. They're not interested in the fish, of course, but I think we've got a vested interest, both of us, in the hatch. These moments are an acute test of patience, and I've been standing here quite some time now. I still believe it's going to happen. If it does, then I think I'm in the right spot. If it doesn't, well, we'll see what happens. And it may be that the water in my feet, it does feel cold still, and it may be later in the day. We're sort of post-lunchtime now, and it may be later that we do get the chance of that sun to permeate into the water just to make a minute difference to the temperature. You never know. That might work for the bugs. It might work for the fish too. But I'm standing here also thinking about my approach, and sometimes it's easy to want to go and fish the water and see if you can bring somebody up. And I was also thinking about what Luke said about being a bit rusty for start of new season and his thoughts on that. And I think if you're waiting out a fish, I think you've got a better chance of connecting with it, because if you've seen it rise, you've got it marked, it means that you can cover it more easily. And then when that fish takes, if we're lucky enough and we've done everything else right, if that fish actually takes, then it's not such a surprise to have to hit on the fish. So that part of it is actually almost sort of played out in our mind a little bit. We're expecting that fish to come up and eat it, so everything's there, whereas it's a slightly more random approach when we're actually fishing blindly or fishing the water. So those sorts of things you think about. And also I think about being connected to this river right now. Because I'm standing watching and waiting, I can feel every little nuance of what's happening right now. So you can probably hear the wind in the background as well, so there's quite a clue there too. But those little subtle changes you're thinking about, right, are the fish moving, are the bugs coming off, what's happening, the clouds come over, so you're acutely aware of everything, and that allows you to think of those changes you might need to make, or the subtleties that are going on in this period of play of the fishing. So yeah, those things, I think the thinking part of it is equally as important as actually doing it. So thinking those things through a little bit, watching, observing, seeing what is happening, and then seeing if those fish are moving. And sometimes it might only take you 5-10 minutes on normal conditions. We're in early season here now, and there isn't a lot going on. It's going to be a tough day. It feels like we've probably had the best of it, and I don't mind that at all. But what I'm doing is investing in where I am and watching everything that's going on, so that if that chance does come to me, then I've got a good chance to actually take it. And I think as things warm up and the fish become more active, that little bit of reconnaissance definitely will pay you dividends further down the line. It's been a weird afternoon. I think the wind shifting round a bit hasn't helped. The sun's sort of come up the edge of the river on the side of it. So that's coming into the pools. And when there's some cloud comes over, then we see occasional rise. And I walked up the river to see Luke, and he was walking down, and he'd seen nothing happening. I'd seen nothing happening. And we decided to camp out in a spot between the place where both of us have been fishing, or the places that both of us have been fishing. And we've seen a couple of fish rise, which is encouraging. He's walked downstream to try and work across to them. And we've been sort of having this conversation, trying to figure out what they're eating, because there's so little on the water to work it out. And we see the odd March brown, the odd large dark. I've even actually seen a granum, I think. So, but not much of it to say, well, this is what they're eating on. And the rises are not by any means consistent at all. We've gone emerger. The rises have been subtle. So we've gone emerger patterns. We both got them on and said, I'm standing on the bank watching. And we both got on pearl butt emergers. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that I'm a massive fan of Paul Proctor's pattern, which is absolutely outstanding and works really well for me. I think if they're not, if you remember what Luke was saying about, perhaps the fish weren't taking as cleanly, I always feel that if the hook's a little lower in the water, you can sometimes get a better hook up that way as well. So we just haven't got a lot to go on really, but that's the plan at the moment. The wind, like I say, has shifted around. It's coming in your face. And one of the things I've been thinking about as well, and before I got out from the last pool, was thinking about the casting aspect of it with the downstream wind and a 14-foot leader or so, perhaps a little bit longer, was how to tackle that. And the key thing, I think, is not to think you got to hit it hard. Back yourself. Don't rush the forward cast. And one of the things I always think about as well is if the wind's coming right into my face, I'll shoot line into the back cast, but I don't shoot line into the delivery. And that helps the turnover a little bit. And if I'm struggling with that longer leader, I'll give the line a little bit of a tug to help it turn over as well. So they're little things worth thinking about. And I also change my casting plane a little bit, and rather than going traditional overhead, I come a little bit flatter, more over to the side. There is thought that the wind is using some of its energy to ruffle the water, so there is a little bit of a vacuum there. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it seems to work for me, so I certainly buy into it, and have always bought into it, and it seems to have worked. So they're tiny little things that perhaps might help if you suddenly find that the wind is coming right down into your face. So there were no joy on the fish that Luke saw. And we're sort of having this conversation right now about, it's a fish they're rising once. Do you just wait and see if they're going to feed a little bit more consistency, with any more consistency? Or do you chuck at them and see if they'll come up? They've got half an eye out. Luke's seen a couple head and tail, and he's waiting them out. He's been waiting them out a little while now. So it's not like we're just sort of throwing and, well, let's see what happens sort of thing. It's been quite considered, and we've been more cautious than anything else. But I've walked upstream a little bit, see if I could spot anything for him, but haven't. I think he's just going to wait there. He thinks they're on emergers, and I'm going to walk downstream a little bit and see if maybe something's happening down there. So I'm going to walk to the bottom of the beat, I think. That's my plan anyway, and see. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed for him. So I found a couple of fish that were rising. I say rising probably once, if that, and I tried to sit them out, see what would happen, covered them eventually, left it, and then just waited to see what would happen. But it seemed as though it's just got that spring feel about it. You know, nobody tells nature it's not start of season, everything's got to happen. And I think today's been a wonderful example of that, but it doesn't detract from the fun that I've had today. It's been fabulous, and see those fish rising early on was really, really good fun. Luke, that was cool. How did it play out for you? Because you sort of sat on those fish. You said you saw some nice rises too.
I did, yeah. About halfway up the beat, there's a nice, very flat, sort of glassy glide, and there were a few fish very subtly head and tailing in the line. 2 or 3 fish lined up, one on the far bank, one on the tail and one in the head. But they were very hard to pinpoint because they were only coming up sporadically. And it's always very difficult to sort of know where to put your fly when you're on that, when you're in those kinds of conditions. So I tried to sneak up on 1 or 2 of them, but it just didn't work out. Not sure if I covered them or not. If I'm honest with you, I don't think I did. But yeah, so ended up with a couple of long distance releases and a bunch of missed fish, and that's the way it goes. But it's been a really lovely day. It's been great to catch up with your good self, as always. But I can't remember the last time we fished together. But it's been just good to tick that box again and have a bit of banter and enjoy breakfast and the rest of the day together. It's been good. It's been really nice, Pete.
I can only echo those sentiments as well. It's been fun. Again, it transcends, and it's easy. You know, it's been a tough day. Let's be honest about it, but that hasn't mattered one little bit. And it was, as I said in the introduction, just a simple case of Luke messaging me or phoning me yesterday and saying, what do you think? And yes, absolutely. And it's been a while since I fished the Usk early season, as I've mentioned on here a few times, and it's been really, really good fun. And what it's done is prepared me to think about what I'm going to be doing on the tour. Not that I need to think about it, but sometimes you can do the things that you always do. And the thing about being observant, I always adhere to when I'm fishing the tour. But yeah, I'll be thinking just a few things about leader lengths, about diameters, those sorts of things, about when I cover that rising fish. And like we said, of course it is early season, so they're not sort of rising like crazy at the moment. And it was hard to pinpoint today exactly what they were feeding on. And I even put a little midge on just to see if there was something like that going on. But that didn't work, but that's fine. That's fine. So, yeah, we've both got our vans here, and I guess you sleep in this when you come up for the weekends, do you?
I do, yeah. I tuck myself out of the way somewhere. A bit of stealth camping, as it were. I've got a couple of spots that I like to go to, and they're tucked out of the way, and I don't bother anyone. I don't leave any mess, and I just tend to just keep myself to myself. And it's once you're tucked up in here, it's lovely and cozy. It's an old T4 van, the last of the T4s, 2003. She's a bit smoky, but she's great, and it's decked out. It's got a fridge and a couple of burners in here, and it's also got heating, a fridge. So it's got everything you kind of want, and a bit of cupboard space, and a pull-out bed. So it's very, I really like it. It's a really good wagon to have to go fishing. All the rods tuck in up along the sides of the van, and the top there's a bit of cubby space there. And she's good. So all good, Pete. Yeah, recommend it. If you haven't got a fishing wagon, have a think about one, because they're well worth it, and you can get sort of off the beaten track, and they're a lot of fun.
I'm about to start the long drive home now. I'm going to eat some junk food on the way home. Got to decide what that's going to be, but I'm going to enjoy that. And I'll be thinking about what happened. I often drive home in silence, actually, and I'll think about today and analyse perhaps just a little bit about what happened, and as I was saying earlier, seeing what I can take from the day, and hopefully it'll help me be a slightly better angler as a result of it. And we live in a world where every day is a fabulous day of fishing, and the pictures and images that we see out there imply that, but sometimes those days aren't always perfect, and today's been a wonderful example. It has been an early season day of fishing, and it's been tough, and I don't mind that. I could easily have not bothered putting this podcast out, but I wanted to, because I wanted it to be honest. I wanted it to show, look, we're trying these things, we're trying to do these things, and it's just not quite worked for us. And even on that drive home, I'll probably think, well, should I have taken my nymphing rod down? Should I have perhaps hung a nymph under the dry? But I didn't, and I don't mind that. I don't feel as though I've had a bad day because of it. Perhaps I'd have caught a few more fish, but it was about more than that for me, at least, and catching up with an old friend, getting the chance to spend some time on the water together. That to me is what it's all about, and that's why I think I love it so much. And I think I've talked about this before as well, that the phases that we go through as fly anglers, and wanting to catch fish, wanting to catch several fish, wanting to catch a big fish, but I really don't think I've ever been that way. There are those odd days where I just want to fill my boots, or I've got the bit between my teeth, but they're very far and few between. I just sort of enjoy every moment for exactly what it is. So I hope this has given you an insight into a day, perhaps a little bit of information as well, a little bit about the thought process that goes into the fishing that perhaps you can take and make use of. I hope you can. But this has been an episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. There'll never be any charge for these. I just love talking about fishing with like-minded people, and hopefully you're enjoying listening to them too as well. And thank you again for all the messages that you send in support, how much you're enjoying it. That's greatly appreciated as well. But this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.